going to see the second unit in history, which is from trade to territory. In the last class, we have discussed about the British administrative organization in India. Under this, we have seen civil services. Synopsis of the lesson. In this session, we are going to see the following topics. The first one is the British administrative organization in India. Under this, we have civil services, army, police and judicial system. Then we are going to see the subsidiary alliance, main features of subsidiary alliance, then merits for the British, defects of the princely states. Then we are going to see doctrine of lapse. Then finally we are going to see factors for the success of the British. The British administrative organization in India. So under this we have civil services. Students, in the last class we have discussed about civil services, right? Now let's see the remaining part of civil services. In 1918, Montague and Lord Chelmsford recommended that 33% Indian should be recruited in Indian civil services and gradually the number should be increased. So, in 1918, Montague and Lord Chelmsford, they recommended that in the Indian civil services, there should be 33% of Indians and gradually the number must be increased. The recruitment must be increased. Then, in 1923, a Royal Commission on Public Services was appointed with Lord Lee of Fareham as chairman. So, in 1923, a Royal Commission on Public Services was appointed with Lord Lee of Fareham as chairman. The Lee Commission recommended that recruitment to all Indian services like the Indian Civil Service, the Indian Police Service and the Indian Forest Service should be made and controlled by the Secretary of State for India. So, the Lee Commission recommended that recruitment to all Indian services like the Indian Civil Service, the Indian Police Service and the Indian Forest Service, it should be made and controlled by the Secretary of State for India. Then, the Lee Commission recommended the immediate establishment of a Public Service Commission. So, the Lee Commission, they recommended the immediate establishment of a Public Service Commission in each state. Then, the Act of 1935 became the base of the civil service system in independent India. So, the Government of India Act of 1935, it became the base of the civil service system in independent India. So, students, so far we have seen about the civil services. So, students, next let's see about army services under the British administration. So, what are the main features of the army services under the British administration? Army. The army was the second important pillar of the British administration in India. So, the army was the second important pillar of the British administration in India. Then, the East India Company started recruiting its own army. which came to be known as the Sipai from Sipahi or soldier army. So, the East India Company started recruiting, means they started selecting people for creating its own army, which came to be known as the Sipai from Sipahi or soldier army. That Sipai army was trained and disciplined according to European military standards and was commanded by European officers. Here, European officers means British officers in the battlefield. During the early stage of British rule, 3 separate armies had been organized in 3 presidencies of Bengal, Bombay and Madras. So, during the initial stage of British rule, 3 separate armies had been organized in 3 presidencies of Bengal, Bombay and Madras. So, the 3 presidencies were Bengal, Bombay and Madras. Then, Army had a great contribution in the establishment and expansion of British rule in India. Then, Indian soldiers were given less salaries and allowances than English soldiers. So, Indian soldiers were given less salaries when compared to the British soldiers. So, this was the main reason for the revolt, that is, the Sipai revolt of 1857. Then, in 1857, the Indians constituted about 86% of the total strength of the company's army. So, in 1857, the Indians constituted about 86% of the total strength of the company's army. For example, in 1856, only 3 Indians in the army received a salary of 300 rupees per month. So, in 1856, only 3 Indians received a high salary of 300 rupees per month. The highest rank an Indian could ever reach was that of a Subedar. So students, now let's see what was the strength of British army. During the Battle of Plassey in 1757, there were only 1950 European infantry. Infantry are the soldiers fighting on foot. Then 100 European artillery. Artillery is using bow and arrows or guns. Then 50 English sailors and 2,100 Indian sepoys. An English army of 6,000 troops was maintained in Bengal. In 1857, the strength of the army in India was 3,11,400, of whom 2,65,900 were Indians. Its officers were British, that is, high rank holders were the British. So, as a whole, in 1757, it was only 600 troops, whereas in 1857, the strength of the army in India was 3,11,400, of whom 2,65,900 were Indians. Its officers were British, that is, high rank holders were the British. So, This was the main reason for the revolt of 1857, that is Sipai Mutiny, which you will learn in the forthcoming lessons. Then, after the revolt of 1857, that is Sipai Mutiny, because the Indian soldiers were paid less, they were given less salary and the rank also very less when compared to the British. That was the revolt of 1857. So, after the revolt of 1857, the important changes were made in the Indian Army services in 1858. They increased British troops and reduced Indian troops. Also, only English were appointed in artillery. Artillery means fighting by using the guns. So students, I hope you are clear with army services. So students, next let's see about police services. How the police services was maintained by the British in India. When the East India Company took over the Diwani in 1765, the Mughal police system was under the control of Faujdars, who were in charge of their sarkars or rural districts. So students, when the East India Company, they got the Diwani rights. So Diwani rights means the right to collect the tax from the people. So they got the Diwani right because of the Battle of Plassey and Battle of Buxar. So at that time, the Mughal police system was under the control of Faujdars. Faujdars like the policemen. He is responsible for each sarkar or rural districts. Here, rural refers to in the village side. So, each sarkar or rural districts was under the control of Faujdars. Then, the kotwals were in charge of towns, while the village watchmen were paid and controlled by the zamindars. So, the village watchmen were paid and controlled by the zamindars. The police system was created by Lord Cornwallis. So students, make a note of it. The police system was created by Lord Cornwallis. He relieved the zamindars from police functions and he established a regular police force in 1791. Then Cornwallis established a system of circles or thanas, each headed by a daroga. Like Faujdars, Cornwallis system was headed by daroga. Then the authority of the daroga extended to village watchmen who performed the police duties in the villages. So, the authority of the daroga extended to village watchmen who performed the police duties in the villages. The hereditary village police became chowkidars. Here, hereditary means from father to sons. That generations is called chowkidars. The daroga system was extended to Madras in 1802. So, the daroga system was extended to Madras in 1802. Before the post of district superintendent of police was created, all the thanas were under the general supervision of the district judge. In 1808, a superintendent of police was appointed for each division. Later, the district collector was entrusted with the task of controlling the police force in the districts. The main task of the police was to handle crime and to prevent conspiracy against the British rule. So, the main task of the police was to handle crime and to prevent conspiracy against the British rule. So here, conspiracy means a secret plan against the British rule in India. Next, we are going to see judicial system under British administration. So, what are the main features of judicial system under British administration? In 1772, the dual government was abolished and the company took over the direct responsibility for the collection of revenue as well as the administration of justice. The dual government was formed by Robert Clive at the end of the Battle of Buxar. It was abolished and the company took over the direct responsibility for the collection of revenue as well as the administration of justice. Consequently, a Diwani Adalat and Fauzdari Adalat were established. Diwani means it is related to revenue case. In other words, the court related to revenue case, for example, land revenue, like that. Fauzdari related to criminal case, in other words, a court related to criminal case. Then, by the Regulating Act of 1773, a Supreme Court was set up in Calcutta. This court consists of a Chief Justice and 3 puisne judges who are appointed by the Crown, that is under the rule of England. This court decided civil case, criminal case, ecclesiastical case. Here, ecclesiastical case, it is a case related to church issues, and admiralty cases. Admiralty cases related to navy, defense, so it is related to administrating issues. Then, on the model of the Supreme Court of Calcutta, a Supreme Court was established in Madras in 1801 and in Bombay in 1823. Then, in 1832, William Benedict started jury system in Bengal. An Indian Law Commission was established to compile the laws. So, in 1832, William Benedict, he started jury system in Bengal to compile the laws. Then, a rule of law was established for the whole empire. According to the Indian High Courts Act 1861, 3 high courts were set up in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras in place of the old Supreme Courts. So, according to the Indian High Courts Act 1861, 3 high courts were set up in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras in place of the old Supreme Courts. Then, Sir Elijah Impey was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at Fort William in Bengal. Then, Sir Thiruvarur Muthuswami Iyer was the first Indian Chief Justice of the Madras High Court. So students, I hope you are clear with the 4 services in the British administration. First one is civil services, second one is army, third one is police, and the fourth one is judicial system. Next, we are going to learn about the subsidiary alliance. Lord Wellesley introduced the system of subsidiary alliance to bring the princely states under the control of the British. So students, make a note of it. Subsidiary alliance was introduced by Lord Wellesley. The main motive behind this alliance was to bring the princely states under the control of the British. So, princely states means the states ruled by the young prince. So, the British, they put the subsidiary alliance with the young prince and they will bring their territory under their control. So, this is called subsidiary alliance. So, it was the most effective instrument for the expansion of the British territory and political influence in India. The princely state was called the protected state and the British came to be referred as the paramount power. It was the duty of the British to safeguard the state from external aggression. Here aggression refers to violence, and to help its ruler in maintaining internal peace. Next, we are going to see main features of subsidiary alliance. The first feature is an Indian ruler entering into this alliance with the British had to dissolve his own armed forces and accept British forces, which means the Indian native ruler entering into the alliance with the British. So, when they entered into subsidiary alliance with the British means when they entered into a legal agreement with the British and they have to dissolve his own armed forces and they have to accept British forces. The second feature is a British resident would stay in his capital, which means the British must stay in the capital of the native ruler. The third feature is towards the maintenance charges of the army, he should make annual payments or cede. Cede means give up some territory permanently to the company. The next feature is all the non-English European officials should be turned out of his state. The next feature is the native ruler should deal with foreign states only through the English company. Next feature is the British would undertake to defend the state from internal trouble as well as external attack. Next, let's see about merits for the British. The British company maintained a large army at the expense of the Indian rulers. The next merit is that all Frenchmen in the service of native rulers were dismissed and the danger of French revival was completely eliminated. Then the British company began to control the foreign policy of the princely states. The next merit is Wellesley's diplomacy made the British the paramount power in India. He transformed the British Empire in India into the British Empire of India. So students, next we are going to see what are the defects of the princely states. The subsidiary alliances made the Indian rulers weak, oppressive. Oppressive means dominating and irresponsible. Protected by British arms, they neglected their duty towards their subjects and even exploited them. The first Indian state to accept the subsidiary alliance was Hyderabad in 1798. It was followed by Tanjore in 1799, Oudh in 1801, Peshwa in 1802, Bonsal in 1803, Gwalior in 1804, Indore in 1817, Jaipur, Udaipur and Jodhpur in 1818. Next, we are going to learn about doctrine of lapse and who introduced this system. Lord Dalhousie was one of the chief architects of the British Empire in India. He was an imperialist. Imperialist means a person who supports or practices imperialism. So what does mean by imperialism? Imperialism means a system in which a country rules other countries, sometimes having used force to get power over them. So Lord Dalhousie was an imperialist. He adopted a new policy known as doctrine of lapse to extend British Empire. So who introduced doctrine of lapse? Lord Dalhousie introduced doctrine of lapse. He made use of this precedent and declared in 1848 that if the native rulers adopted children without the prior permission of the company, only the personal properties of the rulers would go to the adopted sons and the kingdoms would go to the British paramount power. So, students, according to doctrine of lapse, if a native ruler, he doesn't have any children, so he can adopt the children but with the permission of British East India Company. If he didn't get any permission from the company, means the personal properties of the rulers would go to the adopted sons and the kingdoms would go to the British paramount power. This principle was called the doctrine of lapse. It was bitterly opposed by the Indians and it was one of the root causes for the Great Revolt of 1857. So, by applying the doctrine of lapse policy, Dalhousie annexed means captured Satara in 1848, Jaipur and Sambalpur in 1849, Bahat in 1850, Udaipur in 1852, Jhansi in 1853 and Nagpur in 1854. Students, finally we are going to see factors for the success of the British. The first factor is the British got the greater naval power. So naval power means over the seas, then development of textile, then the scientific division of labor concept, then economic prosperity. Economic prosperity means wealth, and skillful diplomacy. Diplomacy means negotiation of the British. Then feelings of insecurity among the Indian merchants. Then final factor is that the inequality, which means differences or discrimination, and ignorance. Ignorance means unawareness or illiteracy of the Indian kings. So, the inequality and ignorance of the Indian kings was the main reason for the British paramount power in India. I have enclosed the classwork instructions in the PDF. Kindly refer it. So now we have reached the end of this session. Thank you.